Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Tomb of the Cybermen, written by Kit Palmer and Jerry Davis, directed by Maurice Barry, and it is the first story in Patrick Troughton's era not to be produced by Inner Lloyd. Instead, this time being produced by a Peter Bryant, and this was the only story he produced, and the reason why he produced it is because they were basically doing like a test to see if he could replace Inner Lloyd, or if someone could replace him. So that's really interesting. Maybe Doctor Who in the new series should do something like this. So anyway, so that's the basic info. Before I get into the story, I just want to state something like, when growing up on the old VHSs before the new series came out, obviously I was exposed to a bunch of stories from the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th Doctors. But the VHSs that were shown to me, there was only one Patrick Troughton story, and it is this one, The Tomb of the Cybermen. And it's the only one in black and white that I remember from my childhood. And so, because it's such visually different from every other story, and I can visually picture in my head it as one of the earliest stories that I remember, I consider this my first Doctor Who story that I have ever watched. Now, that might not be true, but from memory, because it's in black and white and it was the only second Doctor story, it sticks out in my mind as being one of the earliest Doctor Who stories that I can remember. So, this story is a big deal to me, as it is my first story. It is my first exposure to the series, maybe. So, what can I say about it, really? In my opinion, it's probably one of, if not the best Doctor Who stories in the show's history. It's easily one of the best second Doctor stories, and it just has a completely different visual feel from anything around this era. It feels a lot cinematic. The camera angles they choose, just the basic look of it looks completely different from the rest of the series. In fact, in the first scene, when you see the Doctor and Jamie introduce Victoria into the TARDIS, it's shot completely different from the rest of the series, where there's a lot of mid-shots, which is very unusual for the TARDIS setup. Usually you have a lot of like long shots, and then you have like a little bit of like mid-shots and close-ups like throughout the story, but that's very unusual, and yeah, it just looks completely different from any other 60s Doctor Who, which really makes it stand out. Now, before I get into the story, I just want to state that this story was considered lost back in the 1978, where it was officially declared as a lost story. However, they found all 4 episodes in the BBC archives in the 1990s, which on the DVD we have every episode. Hooray! The second Doctor story with all the episodes surviving. So there's that. And when it was missing, a lot of people who only had the audios and the pictures quality for it, it wasn't a fan favourite then. And then when they found it, and you had like the visuals to go with it, it became many people's favourites. It was considered a lot of people's favourite Doctor Who story, and it was like hugely popular. So popular, in fact, here's a fun fact: when it was released in VHS, it outsold Aliens and Silence of the Lambs. That is just incredible. That's a true fact. Tomb of the Cybermen was just hugely popular when it when it got back into the BBC archives. And so this story is remembered very fondly by people, including myself. So what is the actual story itself? So the story has the Doctor, Jamie and new companion Victoria from Evil of the Daleks. They meet up on the planet Telos with a group of archaeologists, and they're trying to find the last tomb of the Cybermen. So, and usually in these build up, these stories in the 60s with villains that we are known of, what normally happens is we don't know, nobody mentions anything about them building up to their first reveal, which the story does as well, but it's much sooner that we get the mention of the Cybermen, which really puts this story a lot more quicker than most stories. Now, this story comes off as a lot of like, it reminds me a lot of like The Mummy, how you've got these archaeologists that are trying to like basically break into this tomb. And it's unusual for 60s Doctor Who. Usually in 60s Doctor Who, you got your main your main companions and the Doctor, and then slowly they split off, and then each bit have like their own like subplot, which then all builds up to the last episode, the finale. However, they didn't do that here. Instead, we have a group of characters that we stick to, and we explore this tomb with them. So it's very strange like that. It's very unique, and it might be a bit of a problem for some people, because the reason why Doctor Who was paced like that is to keep the interest going, as we only have a select few main characters, and you could boggle the plot like with just keeping one storyline. But here it works really well, and I'm surprised that 60s Doctor Who doesn't do this more often. Obviously, when we get to like the 70s and the 80s, it would become like a norm. Doctor Who doesn't really have like a big structure like that. We use like different like structures throughout the series, but here we abandon the splitting of the TARDIS crew trope, and it really works because you are interested in this tomb of the Cybermen and this ancient civilization, and it all builds up very well. And you've got some great moments where they go into like dark, empty rooms, and there's nothing there, and you can just feel like nobody's been alive there for like thousands of years. And I like how the archaeologists build them up as like the Cybermen were once a dominant race, and then all of a sudden they were just completely disappeared, and then they found these tombs. So there's a lot of build up to the Cybermen, but it's not like previously where we don't even get a mention to them. The build up comes from the fact that their names are in the title, so we know that they're in it. But here it's actually integrated into the plot. Our TARDIS crew, our side characters all know that they are going to get involved with the Cybermen. It's just a matter of when. And there's some great moments where where Victoria and Jamie, they go and tell the Doctor, right, we should leave, and then the Doctor's like, we can't because somebody mentioned that name. What name? The Cybermen. So they can't leave, and we get a great dynamic between the Doctor and the rest of these archaeologists. You've got this leader, and him and the Doctor kind of see eye to eye. Not always, but they do kind of like see each other as like equals. Then you've got Clive, who is this mad scientist fella, and the Doctor basically takes the mick out of him without him realising. There's a great moment at the start of episode 1 where the Doctor works out about these switches and how they work and how to open these doors. And so he lets Clive to try and open the other door, but he can't do it. Basically is like showing that he's an idiot. So you got like really funny moments like that. And then you get these like American captain crew, and then you've got this really nervous guy that just wants to get out of there as soon as possible. And so these side characters are very memorable, and he keeps the story very interesting for the first half of the story, where they explore these rooms, and they find a room. Jamie and one of the archaeologists find a room where this wall like hypnotizes them, and then we get our first shot of the Cybermen, or at least a mock-up Cyberman, and it comes out, and yeah, it just works really well, and you got all this build-up and stuff. So then episode 2 has them going down into the Cybermen, the actual tomb bit where it's all frozen and stuff, and there's some great, and then it's revealed that Clive, this woman and her servant Toberman, we'll get to Toberman, how they've been secretly planning to turn against everybody and basically try to rule the world and use the Cybermen to take over the world. And there's great moments where the Doctor tried to work out what Clive is doing. He knew he was up to something, but he didn't know he was trying to bring back the Cybermen. So you got some great moments where Clive is trying to like pull switches, and then when he's not looking, the Doctor presses other switches. So, and it reminds me a lot of like the 7th Doctor, how he would play tricks behind people's backs. So we got like this 7th Doctor-ish moment way back in the 60s with the 2nd Doctor. It really, Patrick Troughton has a lot of gullible moments, and then it's like hidden within darker moments. No, wait, I said that the other way around. He had darker moments hidden in a gullible personality. So it really does, you know, the 2nd Doctor gets a lot to do in terms of showing like bits of character reveals here. And you get Vicky as well has some really great character moments here. There's a bit where her and the Doctor are talking, and they're talking about how when in the last story Victoria's father got killed by the Daleks, and they're talking about how they will remember their family and continue in their lives like this, like time travelers. And the Doctor mentions how like he remembers his family when he wants to, but when he doesn't want to, they sleep in his mind. That's just a fantastic line. It's perfectly shot, well written, and yeah, this is probably the greatest Cyberman story as well. As when we get, as the Cybermen become unfrozen, you got that classic scene of them slowly coming out of their caverns, and they walk out and they go down those steps, and you got that music, which, in my opinion, is one of the definitive Cyberman themes. Yeah, it just really works. There's a lot of atmosphere to it. It reminds me a lot, like I said, the Mummy, of how we got these tombs, and it's like, because firstly the Cybermen like slowly move around first of all as they're about to waken up, and their faces as well, how you've got this lip thing that comes down like that and up. It just really works. And you've also got here the first like leader of the Cybermen, the Cyber Controller. Now it's strange how in Evil of the Daleks they had like the Dalek Emperor, this massive differently designed Dalek who's like the leader, and then you straight on you go from this story which has the Cyber Controller, and yeah, it's just really strange. This is like becoming like a trope of like our army-based villains having like a leader character. So that's really cool. And this thing is iconic, and as you get Clive basically trying to reason with it, as he's like, okay, I woke you up, so you work for me now. And then he lifts his arm up, and the Cyber Controller grabs him by the arm and throws him, and then he's like, and then you got the classic line of the Cyber Controller just going, "You belong to us, you will become like us," which is our cliffhanger for part 2. One of, if not the best cliffhanger in the show's history. Very well. Yeah, I don't know, I'm just sort of rambling here. I'm not really going into detail because I just love the story so much. And And then there's some great moments here where when there basically is a chase scene, but there's so many Cybermen and they take down the Doctor and the archaeologists really quick. And there's a great moment where Jamie escapes, and you think he's going to escape as he goes up to this hole, how they get into the tombs. But one of the Cybermen kind of knocks him out just before he can escape. So there's a lot of tension in there. There's a lot of great moments. And back up on the surface, we got Victoria, and she finds a little bug thing, which are called the Cybermats, and she puts it in her bag. And whilst she's up there, one of Clive's colleagues, this woman that he works with, drugs Victoria to fall asleep, and the camera pans down to the bag, and you see the bag pulsating, and we know as an audience that it's the Cybermat coming to life, but nobody else is aware of it. So there's a lot of great tension moments in this story. And now let's talk about Cybermen. He is a servant to Clive and this woman character, and he's a grunt. He doesn't talk, and they basically explain he's basically the muscle, and he is a black character. So there was a lot of criticism to the story, especially before it was found, how this story is a bit racist when it comes to Cybermen. Now, I think if you have a problem with that, that's totally fine. I mean, the reason why people don't like Cybermen's portrayal here, in terms of how he's written, is completely justified. However, I don't think he's a racist stereotype, because later on in the story, he kind of gets controlled by the Cybermen, and obviously our crew doesn't know this at the time, and he takes down Clive and that woman and frees the Cybermen later on, and then later on though, he basically overpowers the mind control, and he basically saves the day twice. He throws the cyber controller into the controls, which is probably one of the funniest scenes in this story. And also as well, he's the one who closes the door to seal his tombs back up. So I don't think he's a racist portrayal. I think he's actually a decently written character. However, if you do have problems with him, I do understand, and I'm not arguing against it. It's just how I feel of his character in this story. And so we get a scene with the Cybermats basically taking control, as at this moment in the story the Cybermen are locked down in the basement, shall we say, and the Cybermen come out, and so the Doctor comes up with this plan. He puts a wire around them, and the Cybermets come to it, and they get destroyed, and he explains how he confused their brains. And there's a hilarious moment where he goes, you could say they had a complete mental breakdown. And Jamie is just like, oh, Doctor, that was terrible. Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines get some of their greatest moments in here. There's actually one of the most famous scenes in this story is actually just before they enter the tombs, and they don't know where Victoria is in the setting of the story. She's just slightly behind them, and the Doctor doesn't realise this, and so when just before he walks into the tomb, he holds Jamie's hand up like that, thinking it's Victoria, and they take a few steps before realising what just happened. And then they go up to Victoria, and she's a bit nervous about going in the tombs, and how her skirt is a bit too short. And then the Doctor's like, oh, I wouldn't worry about that. Look at Jamie's. And Jamie's just like, hey, oh yeah, right, yeah. So they work very well with each other, and each character in the story has a moment to shine. So it works very well. And yeah, I can't really think of much to talk about the story. I think I've gone through all the details I want to go through it. So, Tomb of Cybermen. Go watch it. That's all I can say. So join me next time where we will be watching another story lost in the BBC archives, and we get introduced to the intelligence. So join me next time in The Abominable Snowmen on the Doctor Who Marathon.